The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogsty Network, a show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports, industrial, media, entertainment complex. I'm joined by my gabbers in arms, as always, John and Steve. How you doing today?
I'm doing just peachy and or keen. Doing all right. I realized how old that sounded. My gosh. I'm doing great.
I'm doing both peachy and keen. So I'll make up for whatever gap Steve has left.
There you go. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting, week in sports, of course. All sorts of things going on. Big Redskins game. By the time you guys hear this, it'll be over, but we're anxiously awaiting it, as we speak when we're recording this. So exciting time.
Way back when, before the game.
Yeah.
Before the sweet relief or the gnashing of teeth is probably how that will go. All right, but that is not why we are here to discuss. If you want to follow everything Redskins, of course, check in with the Hogsty twice weekly. But here we are talking about some business media stories that have clogged our airwaves since the last time we spoke with you. And of course, it is the busy season, as Tony Soprano would remind us over and over again. And that means that the NFL, the National Football League, is dominating most news headlines. So we're going to jump in with some stories there, including a financial decision that was made by a football player this week, and the ramifications of holdouts, missed income, and was he doing a WTF moment? Steve, you've got some opinions on this one. Why don't you catch us up about what exactly happened, and then we will opine.
Okay. Well, first of all, Tony Soprano's busy season was usually killing somebody, and so I would rather stay away from that if at all possible.
No, it was actually NFL season when they were running that many book business,
Oh, okay.
And he couldn't be home for Sunday dinner.
Okay. Well, forgive me then. I'm not Mr. Sopranos, thank God. Okay. No, so what Chris is talking about is LeVeon Bell's decision to sit out the entire 2018 season. Basically, the CBA requires that if you're on a franchise tag, you have to sign by some point or you can't play, and now we're past that point. And so what he has done, the franchise tag was worth $14.5 million in his case. It was year 2 of the franchise tag. So he's missed out on $14.5 million. He's also missed out on 1 year of benefits and retirements, toward his NFL retirement. What was on the table to get this out there, because I think this is important, the Pittsburgh Steelers offered him a 5-year long-term deal worth $70 million. It had $10 million guaranteed at signing. Then it had a $10 million signing bonus that guaranteed like days after signing, like 5 days after signing or something. So in effect, he had $20 million guaranteed at signing. Then he had $48 million coming over 3 years, and then $70 over 5. And it had a rolling guarantee structure where every year more and more money would be guaranteed. That's what he rejected. Which is why the Steelers kept the franchise tag on him. So now he's sitting out. Now the Steelers could actually franchise tag him again next year. Financially, they probably won't because the amount's going to go up, and then they'd put him into quarterback money, just to have a running back. And especially with James Conner, the Steelers probably aren't going to do that. So he's probably going to get to free agency. So here's the thing. This is why I think this is an interesting topic. There's money that Bell is not going to get that is going to be hard for him to make up. So based on the 5-year deal that he had on the table, he had basically $48 million coming over 3 years, meaning coming to him through 2020. Yes, the Steelers could have gotten rid of him in 2020 on the 3rd year, but, they probably wouldn't have done that. So he probably would have gotten 48 over 3. To get to that same point in the same amount of time, because there's a lot of time, there's a lot of interest to be had and a lot of time value of money when you're talking about $48 million. He'd have to actually make $24 million a year in 19 and 20 to get to the same point, and then he'd have to make another $22 million over the next 2 years to get to 70. And so what he's basically done is he's hoping he can make that money up that he lost over the next 4 years, plus the additional fifth year, which would be 2023. And so if he doesn't get a contract in the neighborhood of 5 years, at a minimum $84 million, that's even to break even. And so he's got to get a contract larger than that to have this be financially viable. Now the other part of it is respect, which I think is dumb, but part of it, in his mind, that maybe that's not dumb. And maybe he deemed the 5-year $70 million deal to be a sign of disrespect, and that's why he's sitting out knowingly. If I were his agent, I would have definitely told him to play, because it's hard to make up $14.5 million, as I just went over. So, thoughts?
So, the first thing that strikes me is you have an interesting situation going on in sports in general, where you have the concept for leagues that have a salary cap like the NFL. You have the salary cap, teams are only able to spend so much, but as the years go by, these athletes, the ones who are really good, there is that respect level. They feel, well, I should be making at least as much as this guy. Or, you're going to try to get me into this long-term thing. I've only got X number of years with which I can make as much money as possible. And if you're going to tell me today what I'm going to make 4 years or 5 years from now, I feel like I'm going to end up not, the highest paid guy at my position when I think I should be. And it really does get into this kind of weird bind where you have teams that have a lot of money that want to pay people a lot of money. They're not really able to based on the rules. And then you end up with players that feel like, if you're not paying me the most, then you don't think I'm the best. So it's not going to work out. And it just ends up in I don't think that we've found the right formula yet for how to make all of this work correctly. Because you end up with really good athletes like LeVeon Bell that just aren't playing. And that shouldn't ever be the outcome of contract discussions.
No, I mean, that's clearly not what anybody wants. And I think his teammates seem to be greatly offended by his actions, incidentally. I mean, they've spoken out against him. They basically raided his locker this week, if you guys saw that story.
That was bizarre.
Yeah. Now, if I were Bell's agent, the first thing I would remind him is that I think the closest comp to this that I can think of is Chris Johnson. Chris Johnson did this exact same thing. He was in a fight with Tennessee. Tennessee eventually gave him his big contract extension, 4 years, $53.9 million. So call it $54 million. And he was released a couple years later. The thing about these contracts is running backs typically aren't worth it. They just typically aren't. And in case of Le'Veon Bell, he's already had 1,229 carries in just 5 seasons. Had 321 carries in 2017. He's had a ton of mileage. A ton of mileage on him already. He's in his prime. I mean, he's a great running back. I'm not saying that. But I'm not sure you're going to have a team that's willing to give any running back, even Le'Veon Bell, particularly a guy with 1,200 carries, a 5-year contract worth $84 million. And that's just a break even for him over 5 years. I'm not sure he's going to get what he thinks he's going to get. And even if he gets it, you got to think that in 3 years, the team's going to cut him. History says that's probably what's going to happen. So I'm not sure that financially what he's done makes any sense, and I'm not sure he's listening to, either he has poor professionals around him or he's not listening to the professionals around him. One or the other.
It's hard to deny that he's going to have a hard time recouping the money he's already given up. It's hard to deny that he, even on the signing the tender this year, he walked away from whatever it was,
14.5.
So those are facts. Where I think it's actually more than respect as a motivator on his side is, if he's going to put his body on the line, he wants it done in his own terms. And he probably didn't want to stay with Pittsburgh for whatever reason long term. didn't want to commit, and then probably be kneecapped, literally or figuratively, in a couple years. And so he'd much rather, whatever that next chunk is, he wants full control over what that is, and it was worth it to him to put his body on ice for a year to get that. And he knew that, and Steelers already used him as a battering ram, one that could make, pre-cut reads well, but still a battering ram. And he knew that they were going to load him up this year, and the chances of injury on that contract was going to be fairly high. So I think it's where I probably don't disagree with your analysis. But I do think that his motivation is more than just respect. I think it's doing it on his own terms, with a fresh body, with the confidence that he's in a place he wants to be, even if it means the same money, best case scenario, or legit, probably some less money. There must have been some calculus in his head, correctly or incorrectly, that said he wanted to have it on his own terms and have his body ready for that next contract starting at go, not hoping he stays healthy towards the next contract.
I suppose, and it shows that he's a mercenary, and he's out for himself. And I mean, to a certain extent, I can't blame players for being out for themselves because it's a business, it's their business, and I think the fans have far more loyalty to teams than players do, and I don't really fault the players for it because it's their livelihood and it's how they make their living. So I understand that, and I also understand the guys in the Steelers locker room being mad at him because he did say, "I'm going to be there." He did say that, and they did, and he did abandon them. So from their perspective, I understand that. I also understand why the franchise tag is in the CBA. A lot of fans typically take player sides in these owners versus player disputes like this, which is fine. But I think what people have to remember is, because, the chatter I've seen is, there shouldn't be a franchise tag. The players should have every right to do whatever they want and go wherever they want. But that sounds great. But the fact of the matter is, the owners own this league. The players don't own the league. The players are employees. And the owners are going to do what they need to do to protect their franchise. And that's what the franchise tag is about. And you can't just negotiate the franchise tag out of the next CBA without giving up a whole lot on the players' side, which history shows that they're unwilling to do. So here's my question about this is in this situation, and I kind of liken this, as a Redskins fan, back to the Cousins situation. Is the franchise tag actually benefiting the franchise at this point? Or is it a tool that they can use that they think is helping them? Well, I can still control this asset. I get to, nobody else is going to. But in the long term, I don't think that tagging Cousins over and over again ended up being a good thing for the Redskins. Well, nobody said the Redskins managed this properly. The Redskins mismanaged the Cousins situation.
Well, they absolutely did. And so, the Steelers tagging Bell over and over, is that working? Is that good for the Steelers? Is it good for their organization? Is it good for their for their fan base? Is it good for Bell? And I don't know that the idea of being able to franchise tag the same player year after year is something that's good for the team or for the player or for the league.
Well, I think the Cousins versus Bell is interesting here. Both sides monitoring each other probably the whole time because there's a lot of stuff that's linked. But what's interesting, though, is from the team's perspective, or maybe the league's perspective too, the difference between these two kinds of players, right? Like, you could make a case, there is the case to be made that the Redskins messed up in kind of sowing bitterness and, using the franchise tag and, kind of extending having a quarterback and then needing to solve it. We don't need to relitigate that. But
no, please, let's not live through that.
But what's the difference here is that it makes sense. It made sense for the Steelers just because of the lifespan and physical abuse of the player. Quarterback, they could, can throw out there. Yes, they get injured, but their injuries they can easily recover from. That, just the volume of hits is extremely less. For Pittsburgh to continue to franchise a player like Bell, and maybe even next year, depending on where the salary cap goes up, might even still make sense. Because you can bash running backs and their shelf life is much smaller. So if you extended a running back and used your full power of your tag over the 2 or 3 years, you might get all the value out of that player by the time that transaction, all that tagging is done in a much different way than you would a quarterback. So it's where you get into the intricacies of the game and how these players are used and where it sort of makes sense or doesn't make sense. But your point, John, around there is no doubt that the bitterness that is incurred with players, even getting tagged once, has become a huge part of the calculus of this.
Well, I think the players are ridiculous for being bitter about it, number one, because it's not like they're making minimum wage. I mean, the franchise tag rules, if they have the exclusive franchise tag rules, they make top 5 money. So I think the idea of being bitter that they're being given a top 5 contract is stupid. Quite honestly.
You can judge them on that, but doesn't mean it's not happening.
You're right. Yeah, I just think it's pointless. It's silly for them to be bitter. In response to John's point, though, I think if you look, history shows that usually this works out. There's the only other player I can think of that sat out a whole year was Sean Gilbert. This has been going all the way back to the 90s. He was the Redskins defensive tackle. The Redskins tagged him. He sat out
definitely worked out for the Redskins.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he sat out for a year and then he left. That was the only other one I can remember that was that bitter. And then the Cousins thing was just a highly unusual situation. The Redskins mismanagement. Cousins, I would have said in the middle of it, Cousins mismanaged it, but he ultimately got what he wanted. I can't give a percent. I was about to say some percentage, but more often than not, this works out for everybody. And more often than not, I think the franchise tag is applied solely because the parties are negotiating and they haven't figured it out yet, and so they need another year. That's usually why the franchise tag is applied, and then they usually sign a long-term deal out of it. And it's just this case, it's a weird case of the Steelers having recognizing a running back's value, because they did offer him a 5-year deal. Just he didn't like the amount of guaranteed money. That's what it boiled down to. And then LeVeon Bell having a highly unusual mindset that most players don't have.
So I agree with you that usually franchise tagging works out fine. I would be interested in finding out the percentage of times that consecutive franchise tagging works out.
It's happened very few times. It hadn't happened a lot.
Well, that's the thing, right? It doesn't happen a lot. And we have, in the past couple of years, 2 situations where it's not working out. And I wonder, I think the franchise tag is fine, right? Okay, we want you to play for the team. You don't like the contract that's offered. I get that. We're going to give you this formulaic amount of money that, respects the fact that you're one of the best at your position. We're going to give you that so that we have another year to try to fix this and work it out. If you go another year and you still haven't gotten to a contract, then at that point it might be in everybody's best interest to say, this isn't working out. They're a free agent after 1 year of tagging.
Well, I mean, number one, for running backs, it may be smart I think it's always smart to go on as short a contract as you can. But putting that aside, sure. It may be that teams adopt your position on it, John, and not do that. But the idea that they have the power, they can do it if they want to, is built into the CBA because they have negotiated that right for themselves. And so they're not going to give up that right unless the players give a massive concession somewhere else. And I don't know what that could possibly be, but
it would have to be negotiated.
Yeah.
Somehow.
And I know this show's called It's Just Business, but I do think there's probably it seems pretty clear to me now that Bell did not want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. You can see the reaction of his teammates, the ransacking the locker. There obviously was some other things at play here that made it worth, for whatever reason, not necessarily financial or fully financial, for Bell to force an ouster here that is also playing a part in his motivation.
You know who LeVeon Bell reminds me of? Somebody help me. The Al Pacino football movie where Al Pacino was the coach.
Any Given Sunday.
Thank you. Any Given Sunday. The running back they signed in Any Given Sunday, which was played by LL Cool J, if you recall, the character was played by LL Cool J. The same thing happened to, and his teammates are calling him a mercenary, the fans are calling him a mercenary, and of course, in the happy ending of the show, that movie was at the end he showed heart, in the final play, and so he was accepted, and everybody, gets their pom poms out. But that guy that's Le'Veon Bell here, and I really, I'm usually on the side. You two guys, at least know that my mental and political mindset is usually them on the side of management and these kind of labor management disputes. But I truly do understand where Bell is coming from, and I truly do understand that in this circumstance he needs to protect himself as he sees fit. I just think from a financial standpoint, I would have got the old grease board out and said, okay, if you're going to do this, you need to understand that the chances of you making up the money that you're losing right now today, you probably won't get it back ever.
Yeah, I think that this is a situation where it's more than money for Bell, and maybe we talk about it more on our other podcast. It's just drama.
There, what else is there but money when it comes to contracts, though?
Well, if you feel like the team isn't, looking out for you, if you feel like the team doesn't care about you, if you've been asked, maybe he's been saying, hey, maybe I need to be less of a battering ram and use me a little more sparingly. I only have so many years to do this. Maybe he's got a beef with coaches. Maybe he doesn't like the fact that Antonio Brown is the sort of the spotlight on the team. I don't know what it could, but there's more. If you decide, if I take a job somewhere, and I'm not going to be anybody's running back, but I do work. But if I take a job somewhere, there's more to it than me than how much are you paying me, right? Do I feel like I'm a good fit for what they want to do? Do I feel like the management is a good management structure? There's a lot that goes into that decision.
Yeah, but in the case of an NFL running back, if he signs a huge 5-year contract with the team, he's going to be the battering ram. There's no way they're going to pay him, $84 million and have him split carries.
Yeah, and I think
that's
he feels like at least that'll be on his terms, and he had more agency in deciding where. All right, so we'll move on to another kind of headline popper this week in the National Football League.
Now that we've solved the Bell situation.
Yeah, we've really solved it, yeah.
No one's crying for either the Pittsburgh Steelers or Le'Veon Bell in the end. We're moving on to what was a little bit of a stumble, a flub, a headline grabber, in that the league's marquee regular season game that has been hyped now for 8 to 10 weeks and probably will legitimately live up to the hype, although it'll be hysterical if it's a 9-6 game, was the Chiefs versus Rams on Monday Night Football, which was originally this season's marquee Mexico City game, as Mexico is the other market that the NFL has been playing footsie / more than footsie with other than London. And we heard early in the week, probably I think it was probably Tuesday or Wednesday, somewhere around in there, that they had up and moved the game back to LA, which was the nominal home team in the way that they decide those things. And we now will see our marquee game in LA, not Mexico, because of the quality of the field and player safety. But we'd love to jump in here a little bit, see if we think this was player safety full on. Is this more egg on the face of one Roger Goodell, and is the international expansion of the NFL silly to begin with? So lots to go through here. Jump in.
I didn't mean to laugh during the middle of Chris's intro, but I laughed because when the reason I laughed was that Chris said, "Is it truly about player safety?" And that made me literally laugh out loud because the NFL couldn't care less about player safety. What it's all about is they want player safety because they want to protect the game, because they want to protect their income. They don't care if somebody tears a knee up. That's just not what they care about. They care about protecting the income of the game. I was originally very surprised when they moved this game out of Mexico City, because the NFL and Mexico have been fondling each other, for a long time now. That perhaps word choice, they're But, the NFL and Mexico have been in the backseat of the Chevy, together for a while with these games. And I actually think it'd be much more viable to move a team to Mexico than I do London, because it's just logistically easier. So I kind of get it. But the NFL just could not, I think what it really was about is the NFL could not afford in a time which they have suffered a ton of bad press for the things that we've talked about for a year over on this show. The NFL really doesn't need another round of bad press. And the idea of having, Todd Gurley tear an ACL because he on Monday Night Football in front of the entire world because they played on a craptacular field in a soccer stadium in Mexico is not optics they needed. And I think that's the reason they moved the game. And incidentally, they moved it to LA, and they have a news story in LA, which is we support the people who suffered damage by the fires in LA. And so that's just as good a story. So they've already played that angle up, and so I think that's the reason they did it, and certainly it was the right decision, I think. But
Have you guys seen pictures of the field?
yeah, it's horrible, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. That's my thinking, is that they didn't want to. You've got Kareem Hunt. You have these guys that are speed demons. One of the things that's really nice, one of the reasons this is a great matchup, is that you have two teams that in the past 10 years, 20 years beyond have not been considered powerhouse teams. These are up and coming teams. I think it's a nice breath of fresh air for the NFL to say, hey, look, it's somebody other than the Patriots and the Packers. We've got two new hype excitement teams. And then to take them and to put them in a stadium that it looks like an absolute shithole, that field. It just looks awful. And if you have the goal of trying to get into Mexico, you're not going to have the support of the fans. If the fans look at it and they're like, man, this is the worst places I've ever seen a football game played, they should expand to my high school, because my high school at least has some idea how to maintain a field. This is awful. Mexico is a giant mistake. So I don't think that they want the fan base thinking Mexico is not a feasible thing to talk about in the future.
I think you're very right, and the field was worse than normal because they'd had a couple concerts on that field recently, and that wasn't one of the fields where they can just roll the field up and take it off and roll it back on. And so I think they had Shakira, I think, was there, and she tore up the field.
That's just terrible planning. Yeah. You don't accidentally have a concert.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you go right ahead. I interrupted you. It's fair.
I think it's totally hysterical towards that point, because technically, the way that they knew that this was going to be a problem. They actually had a plan in place, and in fact, as the nominal whatever home team, LA in this situation, because they always have to have one named. That's why Jacksonville is London's team or whatever. That the LA field crew had to monitor and ensure and had the responsibility for getting this, and then they let them book 2 or 3 events within, I think, 2 weeks. So you spent basically a year in planning and setup. I mean,
and nuked it in a day. Yeah,
right. And undo it. Freaking pay the stadium what the gate revenue from that missed business to reschedule it would have been, or something. But how do you spend a year and have a strategic plan in place that allows the field to be used multiple times within weeks of the game? That seems insane to me. And that's planning. That's not act of God type stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a dirt, moment, for the NFL, for sure. It's embarrassing, at least though, I mean, you're 100% right. I can't argue against that at all. I mean, clearly Mexico has an interest in bringing as many concerts in as possible. They also don't want to irritate the NFL, because that's an 8,000 million pound gorilla, out there. And if there's going to be an NFL team in Mexico someday, Mexico City, they want to do it right. Perhaps when the NFL does these international excursions, they need to have provisions in the contract that say you can't use this grass or this field for other events unless the field can be taken up within X amount of time, after, before the game or something.
It's going to be a net win for the league in the end, I think, because one, most the fan base doesn't give a crap about football in Mexico for a whole variety of reasons, including me. I'm actually pretty hawkish against international expansion for the NFL. So I don't care. There's nothing. And you get the firefighter story, and you got it back on a home turf. I mean, this is going to be, because this is going to be a bonanza rating if we're seeing some of they've gotten some good matchups in prime time, and they've been rewarding the networks with ratings. This one, legitimately so, this should be a great football game. So this will be a net win in the NFL probably Tuesday morning.
And I can give a guesstimate about gate revenue that they'd have to pay too in the circumstances, because like if you two rolled into Mexico City and they filled up, say they put 65,000 in that stadium, which I don't think you could put 65,000 in that stadium. You're talking about a gate revenue of, say, $5 or $6 million, and of that, like 10% goes to it goes to the local stadium. Gosh, and then the rest of it goes to the proponents and all that stuff. So I think you're talking about probably about less than $1 million, realistically. And the NFL drops $1 million, like it's changing their couch cushions for stuff if they want to. And so I think the NFL would 100% spend $1 million to promote their international expansion, which one of the very few things that Chris and I have legitimately agreed on in this show is international expansion, because I think it's dumb also, personally. But I think it would be smart to just essentially book that stadium for whatever the amount of time is and pay an extra $1 million, and everybody be happy, and the NFL wouldn't even miss it.
Yep. That's my stunning contribution.
Yep.
So I do need to add here that I found it very humorous when I think Chris said there were 1 million reasons, and including me. So I thought that maybe Chris was one of the reasons. And then
they sent me an
Steve put
email
together a scenario where you two went down there, at which point I thought he meant Chris and I.
No, I meant the band.
I don't know if I'd draw 65,000, but with Chris, together we probably...
You might get 6.
I might get 6, including my family.
Am I bugging you? I didn't mean to bug you. Great Bono quote. All right, so the other piece here, maybe as we transition into we transition and get out of the NFL in general, is the NFL is having a good year. The on-the-field play has been spectacular. You got young stars. You have this very interesting mix of classic quarterbacks still in their prime, at insane ages, your Drew Breeses, your Bradys, your Rodgers, etc. So you still have that class of quarterback. And then you have a bunch of first-round draft picks and young guys doing a bunch of exciting things. The ratings... It looks like ratings have made up the losses of the last 2 years. They have not gotten back to the level that they were 3 to 5 years ago, and that's probably never going to happen. So with exciting play on the field, positive storylines on and off the field generally, yes, a ramp down of the politics for whatever reason in the game day experience and in the conversation, the NFL's riding a pretty good year. And so, the last thing they wanted to do was do a total self-inflicted wound here when they're feeling pretty good about where they're at. And so I think there was a mighty fear that everything that I just mentioned is tenuous at best. And, they saw the scenarios where that caverns.
Yeah, you're right. And if you want Steve's Oliver Stone without any basis conspiracy theory, I think that the NFL, it seems to me, the NFL probably went to the networks, ESPN, Fox, and NBC, and CBS. Yeah, and asked them to ramp down the political talk, because if you notice, and God knows we're not going to address the flag situation because Chris and I almost killed each other one time over, over the electronic airwaves over this, but that story's totally disappeared. Completely and utterly. They're not talking about it. They're not broadcasting the national anthem. They're not doing any of that. And it seems to me that there's coordination there. But that's the point, is that Chris is right. Is the last thing they need is a self-inflicted wound. Patrick Mahomes is like a marketing dream, right? First of all, he's a very exciting quarterback in a high-octane offense. He's thrown 1 billion touchdowns. He's a minority. I don't know what his ethnic background is exactly. I'd have to guess, but he's a minority, and so the NFL likes that. He's young, just at the time when Tom Brady looks to be that Father Time has finally kicked Tom Brady in the nads for good. And now they have Mahomes and a couple other guys. They've got Goff, on the Rams. The last thing they want to do is present those two guys who are the future of the NFL and have something awful happen. You'd have one of those guys tear up an ankle, tear an ACL in Mexico. So I think they definitely made the right decision here. And in terms of the ratings, I think what it goes to show after all the controversy is that the NFL, it's America's sport, with apologies to baseball, and good football, which has happened this year, will conquer a whole lot of mistrust and bad and ill will. I think that's what we've shown this year.
I don't think that you're wrong about any of that. With all of that said, and I tip my hat to you, Steve. I think you outlined a lot of things very clearly there and very effectively. I'm having a harder and harder time with the NFL as a fan, because I feel like they've distributed games now to so many different networks available through so many different packages, and they make it difficult for an out-of-market fan. And I talked to you guys a little bit before the show about this. I'm 45 minutes away from FedEx Field. I'm an out-of-market fan. I can't get the Redskins on my local broadcasting. So I have to now decide if I want to watch the Redskins. Do I, pay through the nose to get DirecTV and then the NFL package on top of that? I bought a long-range antenna to try to pick up some things. I get Fox out of DC. I don't get CBS just because the antenna is not quite good enough or whatever. I feel like they're making it so difficult and so expensive for me to follow my team that it becomes harder every year to justify going through all of the hoops they need me to jump through. It's easier and easier now to find some shady stream that I could try to pick up and watch that way. I don't like doing it because I feel like a jerk when I do that.
But you also have to turn off the Russian bride, ads.
I have to. Well, if you want to, some of them are all right. Plus, I haven't lined up wife number 3 yet, so I've got to start. I've got a list. I have binders full of women.
Binders full.
It's just when this one doesn't work out, you have choices. That's all you want.
Well, it's a contingency. So. The point is, the NFL makes it really hard for me to follow anybody but the Ravens. I don't care about the Ravens. I live outside of Baltimore. I realize that I'm supposed to then become a Ravens fan. It doesn't work that way. So I think that because people are more mobile now, it's, more and more people have to move different places to follow their industry, and they can't bring their team with them in an easy way. I think that the NFL is going to need to find a better way to address that. It twists the knife a little more to know that they have the infrastructure in place to do that. They invested quite a bit of money in making sure that they could broadcast Sunday Ticket over the internet. They can do that. They do that. I'm just not allowed to do that because they've got an agreement with DirecTV, and therefore I'm not eligible to use the infrastructure they put up to watch it online. I have to either pay out the ass or I've got to find a shady way to do it, and it's neither of these are good options for me.
They're definitely, there's a couple of really antiquated things the NFL is still doing that are really, at best, 90s, early 2000s legal technical policy, which is this idea of what's in market, out of market. You've already started to see, with the wiping away of the sellout rule, you're already starting to see some chips away from that, the old broadcast network model in general, of which NFL is basically the only thing doing anything close to historical numbers in that medium. And then the linkage and an exclusive contract with something called a satellite dish, which is about as irrelevant as a rotary phone here, and it will be certainly within 5 years. So there's a bunch of antiquated systems that their broadcast model, both over the top, over the airwaves, over the internet, is still in a very kind of almost 20-year old arrangements.
I've just got I've got a billion thoughts on this. Number one, I know you Chris and John realize this, but for those of you who don't know this, the NFL does have very specific rules with regard to home marketing areas. The NFL has a set area around NFL cities that they consider that team's home marketing area, and other teams can't go intrude on it. You can't, like the Cowboys can't go advertise necessarily in San Francisco, or whatever. And the Baltimore DC dynamic is unusual in that they have waived that home marketing area rules because of the historical NFL teams in Baltimore and, in DC going back decades, and so you, John, are in a weird situation that doesn't normally happen. If you were 45 minutes outside of any other NFL market, that you would be in that team's home market. So there's that. Look, in terms of DirecTV and all of that, I think the NFL has done, it seems to me, what Hollywood does. Hollywood has a blockbuster movie, and then they run it into the ground with too many movies and too many things. And, like Star Wars, like the Star Wars franchise, 3 great movies, and then, Disney decides that they have to make billions of dollars on it, and they're running into the ground, right? And there's, Indiana Jones. They made about too many of those movies. They don't stop when they're ahead. And what the NFL had years ago, they owned Sunday. They owned it even more than church. NFL, there are many people out there, myself included, who at times did not go to church because there was a good NFL game on, And what they have done is they're slowly destroying the NFL owned Sunday thing, and they're doing it by they're having games on Thursday. They have games on Saturday when the college football season runs out. They're putting on 1 billion different networks. They're doing all these things. If they were smart, they would dump the Thursday game, dump the Saturday games, keep all the games on Sunday, and put all of them online, or all of them on a cable package you can buy on any provider, and let everybody watch whatever game they want, and get back to owning Sunday, only we're going to own it in a way that all of you can watch whatever game you want.
Or at the very least, Steve, I think I'm a Redskins fan. I have to buy Sunday ticket, of which I only want to watch something like 7% of those games that I've purchased. Right? Why am I paying, for all of the? I'm not going to watch all of the games. I'm going to watch the games I want to watch. I would happily, pay $100, pay $50. If I could watch the Redskins games consistently, I don't have to have ESPN. I don't have to have, I don't have to have NFL Network. Whatever it is, I can just watch the Redskins. I would be thrilled.
The downside to that, though, John,
most people who follow one team would feel the same.
Yeah, I do too. But the downside to that is that these TV networks are paying literally billions of dollars. And so the reason why they don't want my idea to happen and your idea to happen is that the TV networks want to protect their ratings. So they don't want me to be able to just buy an NFL package. And so until such time comes as they are no longer selling NFL packages to Fox and CBS in particular and ESPN, none of this is going to happen, because there's just too much TV money. It'll be really, really interesting when the TV contracts come back up around in a couple years to renew, to see how it works. Do they go with a traditional model and sell the NFC to Fox and the AFC to CBS, and is it going to be something totally different? That's going to be, you talk about it's just business show material. That's going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, I agree with
you. Were shaking your head when I was saying that.
No, I was not connected. Okay. Well, I think the Thursday night game, I agree with you, by the way, and we've talked about this before, but the Seahawks Packers took a almost 15 share and was the highest rated Thursday night football game in 2 years. So I don't see anything on that sort of the losing Sundays piece. I don't see anything getting in the way of that as of right now, and that at least their most immediate data would suggest that they're going to stay the course. I think it's going to be fascinating what happens. And you're right, the dominance of the TV contracts in every other sport at this point, because the TV contracts are much less lucrative, you can get a pass to watch your team. I paid for my Washington Capitals pass this year. I can watch every Washington Capital. I can't go watch Wild Blues or whatever. I didn't buy the full NHL package, but I can I bought the team specific every game package, and every other sport has that because they can get those deals because the TV contracts aren't in the stratosphere like they are in the NFL.
I have an interesting number that I want to throw into the mix here when we're talking about this, and that number is, I don't know if it's over the lifetime or if it's over the past year. I can tell you, I heard on the radio yesterday, Netflix has invested $8 billion in original programming. So we're talking about the kind of money when you're talking about $8 billion. And Amazon, which I believe is the wealthiest company in the world.
Well, by market cap, they're behind Apple, but yeah, go ahead.
But they're up there. They're not doing too shabby from what I understand. So between Amazon and Netflix, you have enough capital to influence the kinds of contract negotiations we're talking about with NBC, Fox, et cetera. And I think that they are better positioned to deliver content in a more flexible way than the antiquated model that exists right now.
I mean, you guys know I'm an anachronism, and I don't do all that stuff. So
Sure.
I like the idea of just being able to turn my TV on and turn it to Fox and watch the Redskins. But yeah, I mean, that's going the way of the dodo bird at some point. But I don't think I think we're going to see in a couple years, because I think the TV contracts are up at the same time the CBA is up. I mean, roughly. And so I think we are going to see the major networks bid in, and we'll probably have Amazon or Netflix or maybe Yahoo or even Twitter bid to have some streaming rights. But I think the dominant presentation is for this next contract will probably still be on the TV networks. Would be my guess.
It'll evolve.
Yeah, and I bought the MLB package this past year, and I paid $250 for the whole season, and that was to get every game. That wasn't just a Dodgers specific thing. I bought the whole thing because I have another person in the house who wanted to watch other teams. And that was about $250 a year. And so if the NFL was going to sell it, it would be twice that much, at least.
You got 5 times as many games, though, don't you?
Yeah. We had games every day, every night. Every night, I wanted to watch baseball. There was a baseball game on because I didn't watch just the Dodgers. And the NBA package is about that same amount because I've done that in years past too. And so, if the NFL is going to sell a package like that in a manner that was enough to make it worth their while and reflects their position as by far the dominant sport, it would be astronomically expensive. If it's $250 to buy baseball, it would be at least $500 or more, probably more, I think, to buy NFL. It seems to me.
I pay right now, I believe $350 for the DirecTV NFL package over the web. Now, John, to your point, they don't make that's not a full coverage offer for the country because of the things we've already discussed. But in places
we discussed that off the show. Tell them why you're doing that.
Because I'm in New York. Because I'm in the New York City market, where for them getting people to build satellites is very difficult. Because renting, landlords, buildings, zoning codes, the amount of people on top of each other in a city, all the things that a city is. Makes it very hard for them to sell satellites. So in places like that, they do make the direct online full NFL package available. I pay $350, I believe, for that. And so that is there's some version of the future, probably even near future, where that's going to be available to you. The really maddening thing within that ecosystem is then they black out the games I can watch on my local TV. So, if it's, Redskins Giants, I gotta go away from that and go to TV. Or if it's the Thursday night game, the Sunday, I also can't watch that on that platform. Which, a pretty huge side benefit of having this package is I don't have to fight with my wife and daughter for the main television. So so at that point, there's all kinds of there's even embedded problems in that with these markets and blackouts. It still rears its ugly head.
Yeah, but and also, so you paid $350 for that. If the NFL was going to make that available nationwide and it may put that in lieu of some of the marketing, the dollars they're getting back from the major TV networks and make that like a major platform, I think that the cost would have to go up dramatically to make that worth their while. Dramatically.
500. I think 500 is the number you threw out before. If you include
that was me. I had no basis for that. Other, was just
but I think that's a reasonable number. Right? So DirecTV, the base package that you'd have to buy if you weren't in a metropolis, I think is $35 a month, and then the $350 on top of that for the. So you're right around that number.
So I know this is the future. We started this by saying the ratings are up, and and it's evolved into something totally different, which is very interesting. But I think the NFL. I think what we've proven here is that the NFL just stays away from controversial things, no matter how you shake out on it. If the NFL stays away from controversial political and social opinions, focuses on football, it's better for everybody. That's what I think is the lesson we've learned over the past 2 years with this.
That seems like a good capper. I'm 3/4 agree with that. So
You 3/4 agree with that. You don't. There's 25% of you that wants politics in football.
No, I just I'm not going to begrudge or not understand when it rears its head in. I don't want it, so I will 100% agree. I would prefer to not have my chocolate and peanut butter separated in that scenario. All right, so we're going to take a very strange and right turn away from all things ginormous NFL business and talk about high school baseball players. So there have been some new developments in baseball's talent pipeline ecosystem. So Steve, do you want to give us a quick primer and then we'll weigh in on 16-year-olds?
Yeah. Okay. So the NBA, the Major League Baseball, MLB, has announced this week that they're going to start a program for the top 80 high school baseball players in the country, and it'll be a developmental league where it will be managed by and paid for by Major League Baseball, where they will bring Major League Baseball scouts and coaches to manage basically a select baseball league run by Major League Baseball for the top 80 players that are going to be drafted, high school players are going to be drafted in the upcoming draft. It's high school juniors. Now, the stated goal in this is, the reason they did this is because baseball has, at the youth level, you have high school baseball, but the real talent really plays in for-profit select leagues. Perfect Game is the big one, but there's a couple others too that are lesser. Like Nations Baseball, USSSA is another one, but Perfect Game is a big one. And if you are an elite high school baseball player and you're playing in Perfect Game tournaments, you have to have an elite select league, which costs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year to play, and that's not counting the travel. And so what you have is, you basically have kids whose families can afford that, because I've been through this. It costs a lot of money. And so you're losing kids whose families cannot afford to play in Perfect Game baseball tournaments all around the country. And so the idea here is that baseball is going to provide this to better draw elite high school talent in such a way that makes it financially neutral, which will be better. It's better for baseball. It's better for the kids, it's better for everybody. So that's the idea behind it. It's interesting. My guess is that Perfect Game will probably be strongly against it because they're going to be losing business. So that's what baseball is doing. We'll see how it turns out. Thoughts?
So one of my thoughts when I first heard about this, I really like the idea of so there's a couple things that I really like about it. There's one thing that I think wasn't really thought about very thoroughly. The things I like about it, you accidentally said NBA, Steve, at the beginning, and I don't blame you, because the NBA is another league where they're starting to draw kids directly out of high school. That's more and more common now. And we're talking about literally children who are on the verge of being multimillionaire superstar athletes, and I think that it's a really good idea for these professional leagues to start looking at what does that mean? How do we help them through this process? What is our role in this? Because it can't just be ignore. Bam, instant billionaire, this kind of thing. So the fact that Major League Baseball is starting to get involved and recognize that they have and not just an interest, a financial interest, but some sort of obligation to participate in what's happening is good. I also think that it's good that they're funding it. I think that that's an important step, and I think that having them fund the process in an effort to make it more accessible to lower income athletes, families who don't have the money to put their children into the select programs, I think is admirable. The one thing that I'm not sure they have given enough thought to, and maybe they have because I haven't looked into this very much, but generally once a kid is a top 80 elite high school prospect junior in high school, they have already been through a number of fairly expensive select programs. They've gone into a some kind of a athletic magnet school or a prep school. And these things, you're not finding these kids at, your sort of downtown Baltimore public elementary school, that have gone to high school and might be a stellar athlete, but isn't getting the attention that a kid at a suburban prep school is going to get, that has an elite baseball program, because that kid's not making it to that school or into that program because they're not scouting that kid. So I think that they're largely going to sort of find the same kids that have already had the resources to be in the programs that they're looking at, unless they're going to take that a step further and look at scouting lower income areas. But this is, I think, is a very good step for Major League Baseball and for athletics in the U.S. in general.
Chris, thoughts?
Chris just agrees with me 100%.
Chris's mic is off.
Yeah. Sorry, I unmuted. Yeah, it is interesting. The thing I find funny, right, is that even within the system as it is now, in the changes that they're proposing, bring more equity into basically that, to the top athletes within that. And then you're still going to get a kid, right, that they discover in Venezuela at 13. So like also, so does it even, like, is all of these, even if you kind of put on the side, rich kid, poor kid in the United States context, and, whoever those kids are, whoever those AD are getting so much scaffolding around their route to professional, to being a top talent or top prospect. And then you've got then you've got a talent pipeline in South and Central America that sort of needs very much less of that, but needs more cash thrown at them at an earlier age. And so is all of this just a way to ensure, is all of these supports for U.S. players just, to ensure that you get a couple prospects to stem the tide of the sort of unlimited talent in other places?
I don't know if it's unlimited talent in other places. First of all, I mean, there's, a whole lot of American players get drafted, by Major League Baseball every year. There's more international players in baseball than certainly the NBA or the NFL for sure. But there's still a huge amount of talent in the NFL or in the MLB who are Americans. I think John is actually totally right, about what he said in that to get to that point where you're the top 80, you've already been through this whole process. Because I don't know if, for those of you who don't have kids doing all this, baseball is different than football. Baseball, the elite play, really, you almost don't need to play high school baseball. If you just stuck with some of these select teams, you're getting scouted by colleges and pros directly with the select teams. And these teams form at 8. You start playing in these select teams at 8 years old. Some kids don't even play Little League Baseball at all anymore. They just go straight to these select teams. And so the parents and everybody has already spent all the ton of money but to get them to the point where they're in a position to be brought up by the Major League Baseball developmental program in their high school juniors. It's already happened. Baseball isn't one of those sports where it's like football. You can just walk in and start playing it because you're big and athletic and you can hit somebody and run well. Baseball is a skilled technical sport. You can't just bring some LeBron James type, quality athlete in and have him play baseball because it's not going to work because the nature of the game. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is a first step, but if baseball is serious about growing the game in areas in which there's a lot of economically challenged families, they need to start it at a younger age because, you're exactly right. I mean, the top 80 are all from families who've been doing this for 10 years.
I have a question which is a little bit related and a little bit not related. So we talk about the 13/17-year-old prospect in Venezuela. How is it, and we talked earlier about NFL expansion into Mexico. I'd like at some point to talk or think about where is the MLB expansion into Puerto Rico, which is a hotbed of baseball players. It's part of the United States. I mean, I obviously has been decimated by a hurricane a while ago, and it's got its share of issues. But time zone wise, it's not far away. it feels like that would be a really good place for MLB to put some of its focus.
Except that there's about 5 people can afford to buy a ticket to a Major League Baseball game in Puerto Rico. You have to have a market that can fill, because baseball revenue is driven much greater than NFL. It's driven by ticket revenue. That's
sense.
a huge amount of part of. That's why big reason why the Dodgers have so much money, because they routinely have the top attendance in baseball. That's one of the reasons. So you can't put a Major League Baseball in Puerto Rico. You could put one in Mexico City, because there's millions of poor people in Mexico City, but there's also millions of rich people, and so they could hypothetically, you'd have to have a major city like that. Puerto Rico would never work.
Gotcha.
Didn't they do some exhibition games in Puerto Rico about 5 years ago?
Yeah, they have, but that's different than putting a station
Yeah.
in a major league team there.
For sure. I was just remembering that they had done some of that.
That's why they don't go to like Venezuela, because it's not going to bring 30,000 people to a Major League Baseball game, 82 of them, 81 of them on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's also why they tried that. What do they call it? The World Cup of Baseball or whatever. What is that?
Yeah, it's I can't remember what the name of that thing. The World Series of Baseball, the World Cup something, but it's
The World Series of Baseball.
no, that wasn't it. That we have the World Series. What he's talking about is the international, the international tournament, which is basically. It's stocked by Major League Baseball players, plus a Japanese team. That's what it is.
Yeah, and it's a way for them to feature high-level baseball in international locales.
Right.
All right, so considering that we are probably as far away from baseball as at any time in the sports calendar, right about literally right now, we will use this opportunity to take bid adieu for this episode of It's Just Business. We have talked, we have laughed, we have argued. It has been another episode. Any parting shots?
I want to point out real quick that I think Steve agreed with me on something, and in the following segment, I agreed with Steve on something.
Yeah, which is a miracle. Because, like you said, there's not a lot of things that John and I agree on. So
It's a beautiful moment, I think,
don't get
for
to,
my family and I.
You know what? It's having people agree with me generally is not my goal in life. And so
or anything you've ever experienced.
Yeah, or anything I've ever experienced. And so, I will have to bring the contrarian in me out more on the next show.
Sounds good.
Well, Steve and I are quite used to him bringing out my inner Ayn Rand, and I bring out his inner Saul Alinsky. So we have already crossed that bridge many times.
True.
Okay, with references that many of you will not understand, and, boot up Wikipedia, please improve your intellectual knowledge. We will say goodbye. You can find me and yell at me and my intellectual elitism at ChrisLarry33. Steve, you can continue to argue with on the Hogsty Twitter account, it sounds like.
Yes, because we've done a lot of arguing this week.
And John, have you gotten your signposts more aligned?
At John_Worrell. WORRALL, which nobody will ever spell correctly, and I'm okay with that.
I'm glad to see you didn't make up a Twitter handle this time.
No, I have my phone in my hand. I'm like literally looking at my phone to reference my Twitter handle because I don't know it.
And if you do tweet at any of us or one of us, and it's about something on the show, something you'd like to see the show cover, just give it the hashtag IJB. And with that, I think we are draw to a close.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.